Niger's military junta has announced the closure of the country's airspace amid expectations of the West African bloc threat to carry out a military intervention in the country should the ousted President Mohamed Bazoum not be released and reinstated. The Economic Community of West African States had given the coup leaders until yesterday to reverse their military takeover and restore Bazoum's rule. Well, back home here in Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu yesterday night met with 5 northern governors who share borders with Niger. The meeting is part of consultation by the president of the situation in Niger Republic. Well, the Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, former Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Muda Yusuf, is in the house for us to talk about the economic implications of all of this. Good afternoon. It's good to start the week with you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Yes, I want to start first. What I'm even seeing, or what I saw before I came on air, is that Moody's has even hit Niger by cutting down from, I think, following the sanctions. And Moody's is now rating them lower. There is likelihood that all of these sanctions, if fully implemented, will take a toll on this country. Now, what do you think, or where does Nigeria stand in this? Should I start with that way, or do you think the sanctions are really the right way to go?
Well, from the various commentaries that you have had,
yes,
and the various concerns that have been expressed, I think the consensus, more or less, is that ECOWAS should be a bit more cautious, particularly in invoking military action against Niger, because that will come with a whole lot of ramifications, the extent of which we may not even be able to predict. So at least we have heard from the National Assembly, and from your intro, you talked about a meeting between the president and the governors in those areas and so on. Yes, it is important to ensure that we preserve democracy. Even from an investment point of view, investors are generally more comfortable with a democratic environment than a dictatorial or a dictatorship environment. So from an investment and economic point of view, democracy is always better. So to that extent, I think we should support what the position of ECOWAS, in condemning and trying to restore democracy in Niger. Because from what we have seen, it's looking like a contagion. It's moving Burkina Faso, yes, Mali, Chad, and only recently even Sierra Leone also attempted a coup. So there was a need to put a stop to it. I think that is what led to that kind of firmness of action that was taken by ECOWAS. But nonetheless, I think there is need for caution because of the wider implications of a military action. So I think the consensus now is to pursue a diplomatic option, to prevail on the military junta, to be able to get back to a democratic. I think that is the best thing to do for now. As much as possible, what I'm hearing from all the critical stakeholders is that we should avoid a military action because of the very huge implications that it has. It has implications for the economy, not just the Nigerian economy, even the entire economy.
Entire African continent.
It has some serious cost implication as well. Because when we are talking about ECOWAS, especially when it comes to committing resources, Nigeria typically carries the biggest burden. So when it comes to that, the pressure on Nigeria will be a lot more than the pressure on all these other countries. Because if you look at our experience, because in matters like this, it's also good to look at history.
Okay.
Now, we used to have ECOMOG. When we had the Liberian War in 1990, there was a decision by ECOMOG to go into Liberia to restore peace. So it was called a peacekeeping force. And because, of course, at the peak of the intervention, we had about 16,000 troops in Liberia. 80% of those troops were Nigerian troops. So that tells you the amount of burden that Nigeria had to bear, you know, by way of prosecuting that war. And at the end of the day, it cost Nigeria about $8 billion. At
that time?
Yes, at that time. We're talking about 25, 30 years ago. $8 billion. And we thought it was going to be maybe a walk in the park, maybe a few months, 1 year, 2 years. But it became protracted. ECOWAS was there for 7 years. And shortly after that, ECOWAS was deployed again to Sierra Leone. Because around 1998 or thereabouts, the democratic government in Sierra Leone was also overthrown. So ECOWAS was mobilized to go to Sierra Leone. That also cost us about between $4 to $5 billion. I'm talking about the cost to Nigeria.
Yes.
So you can imagine the impact of that. Not to talk of the loss of lives. Together between Liberia and Sierra Leone, we lost over 1,000 troops. So when you begin to look at all of this, and you begin to ask yourself, what exactly have we gained in all of this? Even after the war, even to get some of these countries to support us at the UN, was a tug of war. And we have expended resources, similar resources in South Africa, in Angola, in Congo, all over the place. So when you look at the cost implication of going to war, it can be very, very colossal. It can be very, very prohibitive. And given a situation that we are now in the Nigerian economy, the economy is still struggling to recover. You know, we are grappling with high debt burden. We are grappling with high debt service. We have challenges with the exchange rate stability and so on. A whole lot of issues to grapple with. And on top of that, we also have a problem of insecurity.
It was.
And when we get involved in matters like this, particularly in Niger, the scope of insecurity problem may even expand more. Because there is a geopolitical dimension to all of this. All of these challenges we are seeing in the Sahel region. You know, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and all of them. So there is more to it that, you know, we are seeing on the surface. So getting involved in that could make the burden a lot more for Nigeria, because ECOWAS is looking up to Nigeria to shoulder the responsibility of this, more so that our president is the current president chairman of
ECOWAS. That's where that comes to me. And we see that Femi Akonde, my colleague there, he was on his way to Niger and they couldn't make it in. Yeah. So we now have blockades everywhere. So I'm looking at inter-border trading even between us, because I hear we do a lot of agricultural movement around Katsina and Yobe. The governors were present yesterday. What does this also mean for us as a country? And we're talking about AFCFTA here. I think we've even put that on the side for now. How does all of this come in?
And the interesting thing is that this president that was toppled in Niger was the champion of AFCFTA.
Yes, he was very active.
Yes, he was one driving the whole thing about this AFCFTA. And now look at what has happened to him. And these are not good omens for our economic integration prospects. Now, well, we can have sanctions. But the thing about sanctions is that it's a double-edged sword. It will hurt the person imposing it. It will also hurt the other side. You know, as we can see now from all the stories coming around, many of our citizens who trade with Niger, many of them are stuck now. You know, and these are innocent citizens. So they keep wondering that why must they go through this? Because there is we desire to remove a military junta in Niger. So it's going to create a major problem for trade within the sub-region. You know, ECOWAS, one of the key mandates of ECOWAS is economic integration. If we continue this way, with all this coup and our reaction to this other problem in Niger, it could lead to further fragmentation. So rather than have an integration, you continue to fragment the entire sub-region. So the whole concept or idea, objective of economic integration is beginning to collapse. You know, so that again is a major issue. Another challenge of getting militarily involved is that, first of all, you don't know how far it will go. Yes. I cited the example of ECOWAS. We thought it's going to be 1 or 2 years. 7 years. It spent 7 years. So there's a great deal, you know, there's a great need for caution in taking such big steps, because it is also not easy to attract investors to a country where there is serious military engagements. You know, whether you are the aggressor or you are the victim, no investor wants to go near that. And this is even more challenging because we are dealing with our neighbor.
Yes, very close to us.
Yes, because unlike what you had in Sierra Leone or Liberia, they were a bit far away.
Yes.
So there was no immediate impact on our own citizens here. But we are dealing now with our neighbor. We share almost over 1,000 kilometers of border with Niger. So all the border communities and border states are also highly vulnerable, which is why some of the senators and governors in those states have also been expressing concern.
Yes.
And I believe that the president, being a listening president, he will review all of these things and possibly come up with a different approach to dealing with this matter. Because military options should be, at least for now, be taken off the table so that we don't create more problems.
I'm looking at the power cuts now, no-fly zone. Also, we've talked about land border businesses and how that will affect trade and all of that. Economic and financial situation, of course, that the country itself will be in at the moment. From research, I think Niger too has natural resources which they should be able to, but they've not been doing so very well. What do you have to say about the economy of that country itself?
Well, the economy is very small,
it's
very fragile, and partly because of, again, it's partly because of the quality of governance too. Because from all the information we have, land, they have a lot of uranium.
Yes, uranium.
And it's also possible that their link with their colonial masters has also not allowed the space to flourish and for a lot of more innovation, more indigenous participation and all of that. Because for many of these Francophone countries, they are too dependent, unlike what we have in Nigeria. They are too dependent on France for a whole lot of things. You know, the financial system, the natural resources, the military support, and the dependence was too high, was too heavy. And when you are over-dependent, you are not likely to be able to express yourself properly, and you will also not be able to, drive the economy in a way that will benefit your own people, to the maximum. So I think the whole framework of governance, and particularly the high dependence on their colonial masters, has caused a lot of, drawback for them. And on the electricity thing, well, it's unfortunate that that has happened as part of the sanctions. But again, we need to be careful about some of these things.
Yes.
Because we are not just giving electricity for the sake of giving electricity or to please them or to, no. There was an understanding decades ago that because we are building both the Jeba and particularly the Kanji Dam, and the Kanji Dam is fed from water from the River Niger. River Niger flows through Niger up to Nigeria. And the whole idea was that in order for them not to dam the Niger upstream, we offer to give them electricity here. So that is what led to that. So now that you have taken this action, you may also now begin to have a rethink as to whether they should not go back. But I believe that if we step up the diplomatic, side of the engagement, I think a lot of these things will be resolved diplomatically.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to follow up with that diplomatic option at the moment. It's not going to be very easy. Where do you see that also starting from? From the ECOWAS end, from their end? Because it seems to be a little complex now.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I think the AU is getting involved now.
At the moment, okay.
Yes, the African Union is getting involved. Because ECOWAS has already taken a very firm stand
on the matter.
That's true. You know, and when you take such a firm stand, sometimes it's not easy for you to begin to shift. So with the involvement of AU, the African Union, and possibly even the UN, I'm sure the dynamics may change, you know, so that to pave way for a diplomatic resolution of the matter. And the issue is even much more challenging because even the citizens of that country seems to be in support of the military junta, which makes it even much more, you know, difficult to deal with. So all of these factors need to be taken together to inform the kind of strategy that we'll adopt, you know. But military option for now, I don't think it should be contemplated because the cost, both to us, to ECOWAS, and even to Niger, the cost will be horrendous.
When a country goes through this kind of process, servicing debt might also be an issue. Maybe if they're paying off debt, and that's why the likes of Moody's will come in and say, this country is not safe anymore. What do you see to countries where they have commitment, or like where Niger has commitment to some banks? How would they service all of that at this moment when the country is kind of turmoil?
The economy will simply crumble.
Wow.
Because it's not even a strong economy.
Before now.
Yes, it's not a strong economy. I mean, the GDP is very small. I can't remember the exact figure now. But it's a very small economy.
Population is also not...
Yes, it's a very small economy. So any exposure, any involvement in these things, will lead to a complete collapse of the economy. But you know, for the military people, sometimes they don't even care about some of these things. Theirs is to be in power and take control. Whatever happens to either multilateral agencies, their debts, many of them don't care because they don't appreciate the importance of some of these critical economic factors, investment implications, economic implications. That is not priority for them. Their main priority is just to grab the power and begin to allocate resources. And most times when they seize power, they are not necessarily better than the government from which they have taken over power. So it's going to have serious implications, you know, for Niger. And even for us, if we get involved, you know, funding military action is not cheap. And it's foreign exchange. You fund it in dollars, whatever foreign currency. Because you are talking of ammunition, arms, all these things are not cheap, and they're foreign currency. So even from our own point of view, this is not the time for us to put any heavy pressure on our reserves. Because if you go into this kind of thing, we should be talking about between $1.5 to $2 billion annually to be able to fund that kind of military operation. Because all these other ECOWAS countries, I mean, who is there to give us any support? Ghana is the only economy that looks a bit okay, but, you know, Ghana too is struggling. All of them are looking up to us, you know, to pick the bill. So from all angles, I think it's something that requires a lot of caution, and I'm happy that a lot of, you know, entities have been made, counseling and appeal have been made to ECOWAS, particularly to our own president, to review the situation again and, you know, look at a new strategy that will emphasize the adoption of, you know, diplomatic engagement.
Because I even believe that the meetings with the governors too would have touched on that yesterday. Because those governors will be concerned.
They'll be concerned.
Neighboring, if anything happens, it will definitely affect them. We heard traders there already complaining the cattle market almost empty and other agricultural produce. So what will be your final word on this?
Well, my final word is that because Niger is our neighbor, because we have never gone to war with any of our neighbors. The closest we got to was with Cameroon, but we didn't go far. And under Obasanjo, I think we just conceded some portions of the land, this Bakassi, to them, just for peace to reign. So because Niger is our neighbor. We should, as much as possible, refrain from, a military campaign or a military operation, and we should emphasize this diplomatic action because the collateral damage, the cost implication for the economy, implication for our macroeconomic environment, implication for investment, all of these things are huge. And we have a lot more at stake than even Niger. What do they have in Niger?
We have the population.
Yes.
We have the market.
Yes. And because of the geopolitical dimension, because that theater now is now becoming a lot of geopolitical competition between Russia and the West. All these things are happening in the Sahel region. So we should not get entangled in that kind of environment at all. We should avoid it.
It's always interesting having you on the show. I've been speaking to Dr. Muda Yusuf. He's the CEO of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise and former DG, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much for starting the week with us on Business Nigeria and making real sense of this topic. We appreciate this.
Thank you.
All right.